Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthi Tan, and today's episode is based on minutes 101 through 105 of Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. In this set of minutes, Holdo parts ways with the Resistance, escaping on their transports. Rose and Finn find out that DJ has sold them out, and KYLO Ren slices Snoke in half. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Pete the Retailer from Star Wars Minute, and I'm very excited to speak with you, Pete, about these minutes.
I'm excited to be here.
Are you nervous?
Am I the one and only Pete the Retailer? It could be, I guess, probably, right?
I think so.
But yeah, thanks for having me on. I know I'm hard to again. I said not from lack of interest and not from lack of enthusiasm, but I just sometimes I just get distracted and fail to answer emails, and I'm happy that we could work this out.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Because there's stuff. In addition to the minutes at hand, I also have an exterior question about a different Star Wars movie that I've been wanting to ask you for a while.
Oh, so. Great. Hopefully I can answer it.
Yeah.
But I feel you on the emails. I think I'm going to declare like email bankruptcy in like a couple months or something. I think it's just going to have to be a thing I do twice a year, where I'm just like, if I haven't responded to you by now, it's not going to happen. And I just need to absolve myself of everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Anything previous to this? Or actually just make up a new, I don't know. I was going to say you can make a new email address and be like, hey, so I don't have access to that one. Just send me new emails to this if you want. And then you have an excuse, but you really still have the old one. And you can go back to it. Be like, oh, I got my email address back after a little while.
Yeah.
That seems like fraud or something. Maybe don't do that. I don't know.
I'm not gonna manage 100 email addresses for that reason. Can't enable me like that. So you infamously, I mean,
pretty infamous.
You often state that you don't notice the music.
It takes a while for me to notice the music. Yeah. So it has to stand out either in a really good way or a really bad way for me to notice. And unless once it's something that I've watched, a million times, then it starts to kind of become ingrained.
So did anything stand out for you in a good way or a bad way in these minutes?
Well, I went back and just now I played the minutes back without watching it, just to make sure that I'm like, all right, what's going on here, so I can focus.
Like you just listened to them?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I hit play, then put a different window over it, or hid the window. So I was like, okay. And there's a handful. I'm glad. I think actually on this week's episodes where we talked about these minutes.
Like on Star Wars Minute.
On Star Wars Minute. That's where I'm from. Sorry, everybody.
I think most people know.
I think I might have said, I got to ask Chrysanthi about that, because the main thing that this actually stood out. I was like, oh, the music, it's not in the first scene. The first scene, we have some uncertainty music I wrote, and it's a very kind of like unsettling.
Like with Holdo?
With Holdo and Leia talking to Poe about stuff, there's a little bit of like, what's going to go on? What's happening here? Kind of music. Which I don't know if you want to talk about that, but then
let's go straight to your question.
Yeah, it immediately goes to once we get onto the Snoke's ship, then we're doing the execution bit, and like it starts out with the music going to the beat of the boot stomps, and I was like, oh, like that's a weirdly kind of like bridging kind of like diegetic, non-diegetic music. I can't think of any other examples of that from Star Wars.
I wrote that in my notes, actually. I wrote, the footsteps are diegetic to the beat. Yeah. And I think they definitely are. I couldn't find like on the soundtrack whether, like I couldn't find the cue on the soundtrack for some reason, and it might be on the soundtrack, but it just wasn't in any of the places. I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't combing through it like detailed enough, but the footsteps, I think, are not, even if that track is on the soundtrack, the footsteps are not. Right. The reason I don't think the motif is on the Last Jedi soundtrack. again, like let me know someone if I'm wrong. Because we first hear that in The Force Awakens. So I was trying to like go through all the Force Awakens ones. So maybe it's on the Force
Mm.
Awakens soundtrack.
So it's like a remix.
Um, yeah,
They
I mean
took it, and they put boots on it.
I like it with the boots.
Yeah.
And so what Pete's talking about is, and like we've already heard this motif, like we've already heard this in this film, like 10 minutes ago. So it's so this is like the stormtroopers are marching to the beat where it's like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
it's just
totally.
like a very militaristic, like in tempo, strict tempo thing.
Right. Like a not a rally song or like a, but it's a very like, it reminds me a little bit of the like when the battle droids are perking up in the Phantom Menace, that same kind of like
The trade,
like that build,
totally, it's very
militaristic
trade
thing.
federation-y.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, this is notated as a motif, or like if for those who are following along with the Frank Lehman's Star Wars thematic catalog, which is the catalog that I use the naming conventions from, and also if you refer to it, which I'll put a link in the show notes, um, it just makes it easier because they're numbered and stuff. So this would be
Mm.
number 87, not of the main leitmotifs, because it's not really like a main thing associated with a character or thing, or it's not like huge yet. It's not really
Right.
huge in the movies. It's in the category that he deems incidental motifs. So just like stuff that kind of happens when, just things that haven't been promoted yet to like leitmotif status. So this is number 87, and it's just called
Mm.
March on Board Spacecraft.
Mm.
So I think it was like
Accurate.
not really meant to be that big of a deal, but it
Mm.
is handy when, in spots like this, exactly
Sure.
parts like this.
I
So good catch. That was one of the things I was going to say.
All right. I'm on it. Um, yeah, it starts out with that, then it quickly kind of like not dissipates, but it goes into the kind of the a more kind of subtle, background music with, and I know you're it's not the music, but you've been talking a lot about the kind of the sound mix too, and there's these kind of ambient ties of just kind of like
They're
they're
great.
just in a hangar and they're flying around, and every once in a while, um, I think this week Alex said it was like they're like a bird in a Costco where they're just there's ties just going around and like you don't even notice they're doing their thing. Everybody's on the ground just working on their
Which is
working
sort
on
of
their
how
business.
Galaxy's Edge is.
Right. See that they need to add. I guess could they do like if they did drones over Galaxy's Edge that were
Like real
you
ones
know
that, I mean, that could like take pictures, you mean?
no, well, like of drones. Like let's say they did Tie Fighter drones, but they were scaled and then they were high up enough that it was hard to tell exactly how far away they were and therefore what the actual size was.
Oh, you mean
So
like
it would
actual
almost be like, oh,
practical effect?
there go a bunch of Tie Fighters overhead. Yeah,
Oh, huh.
like while you're out walking around, if all of a sudden you hear just like, like the sound would be tough too, I guess.
Well, the sound is what we already hear there.
Right, right.
Oh,
So if
I
you
guess it would be hard to match, to line them up, is what you're
yeah,
saying. Yeah.
and hard to mask that kind of that drone whine, but
Huh. That would be, what if one of them fell on a on a guest's head?
yeah, I think that's the problem. You have to do it like over areas where there's net. Or I guess do it over the non-populated parts. So they're going kind of overhead, but not overhead. You know what I mean? So you can be like, oh look, there
Like
they go, but they're
overhead
really
on a different, like, yeah, I
right.
see what you're
They're
saying.
they're just flying over backstage or something.
Well, Disney, if you're listening. Um, one thing that is actually interesting is before that, in the music that you were saying with Holdo and how it's sort of more unsure and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
What's actually playing when Holdo says Godspeed Rebels
Hmm.
is a like slowed down version of March of the Resistance.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Totally.
And this is the second time that we've heard this in association with Holdo. And the first time I heard it was, I think, when she was giving her like first speech, like more toward the beginning of the movie. And I mistook it for the Force theme, but like with sort of an inverted turn because I realized, like I was realizing this yesterday, like I bet I mixed up the Force theme and March of the Resistance quite a bit when they're slowed down and sort of taken out of their
Mm.
rhythm because the Force theme is. And March of the Resistance is. And
Yeah.
then, but it didn't,
Mhm.
when it doesn't play the full thing and it's just that first bit,
Right.
they're very similar. And March
Almost.
of Resistance is normally thought of as something that is reminiscent of the Droid Invasion Trade Federation March too.
Right.
But here it's not rhythmic like that, and so it doesn't sound like that there.
It's
So I
almost
think
bridging the
it's
two.
interesting.
It's like one foot in each, one foot in the Force theme and one foot in the, which is uh, accurate, I guess, appropriate somehow. Maybe I don't know. They're not as militaristic, but they are essentially, the resistance being the ones who were wanted to kind of take more kind of military action than the Republic was willing. So they are, in a sense, that militaristic kind of arm of the idea of the rebellion, the resistance, and they use a lot of at least graphically, they use a lot of imagery of that, the Force theme kind of tying in with the rebellion, the little, what's that bird logo? It's not a bird, but you know what I mean. The classic Star Wars,
Right.
rebellion logo. And so it makes sense, I'll say, for them to have kind of one foot in, you know, Droid Army and one foot in the Force theme because they're kind of drawing from both as far as their motif, their idea.
Interesting. Okay. So now I'm thinking of when you say the Republic is less sort of militaristic or less willing to take military action, do you mean like prequel era Republic?
No, New Republic wasn't
New
that
Republic.
the idea was that as far as I know, I haven't read a lot of the materials, but people try to fill me in on things, sometimes nicely and sometimes like, God, I can't believe you didn't know that. But um, as far as I know, it seems like uh, the resistance is basically an offshoot that the rebellion, the Republic was starting to get a little kind of comfortable after they retook power, and then they were like, all right, well, we don't want to have like a standing army because we don't want to be like the Empire. And the Leia and the other members of the resistance kind of leadership was just like, wait, but we're not done yet. We still need to get rid of or be prepared for, the remnants of the Empire, and
Yeah, I think
that's
it's
their offshoot. So,
something I did notice in these minutes is sort of the veterans of the movement, like Holdo.
mhm.
I mean, Leia didn't necessarily say it, but Holdo definitely did. And even Snoke says it later, is like Godspeed rebels. She's not like
Yeah,
Godspeed resistance. Like they all still like they're the same movement. It's the continuation of the same movement to them. And even Snoke is
right.
like something like your rebel friends or whatever, like rebels too. Like I guess we
Yeah.
just call them rebels and it's the same, but
Sometimes they need their own people to be like, actually, we're called resistance now,
right.
just to be like, oh, okay, right, right.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I
Um,
notice about the military themes is whether
mhm,
it's the good guys or the bad guys, they all like they have more similarities than differences. I think
mhm,
like when you play the Trade Federation theme and the March of the Resistance and the Imperial March and even like, just other ones, even like in the new stuff like Bad Batch theme, just like anytime you're going to get a military march, it's
right.
no matter what side you're fighting for, it's like it's a military march. And there's going to be, and it's going to sound sort of like direct, like there's no way to make that sound like, I don't know, just like happy and free spirited. That's like not the point of that music
Right.
and what it
You,
represents.
you sound like DJ. Good guys, bad guys. It's
but
all it's all the same.
but the fact that like I can mix up March of the Resistance and the Force theme when
Mhm.
it's just the melody and the rhythm is taken away also shows that like it's not necessarily the melody that defines that piece of music, or
Mhm.
it's it's the rhythm and it's like the other elements. So like theoretically anything can be done, any march can be unmarchified, can be the militariness can be taken out of it if you change other elements of the music, maybe rhythm, maybe instrumentation, maybe the tempo, and things like that. So
Mhm.
I think that's a really cool thing about music is that, you know, sometimes when we talk about like these motifs and these themes, like everyone is so focused on what the melody is, and some other people are really focused on maybe what the harmony is, and those are like the parts associated with the notes. But sometimes the real motif is like in the rhythm or like in some other element. Like, what if you took Emperor Palpatine's theme and made it higher pitched and faster, and or took some other theme and made it like really low choir voices? Like, you could really change how we perceive that by
Sure.
tweaking some elements.
I mean, that's a I feel like we get that a lot in pop culture with, the kind of cliche these days of like a movie trailer using like a moody, slow, atmospheric version of like an 80s pop song or something, you know what I mean? And it's just like, oh wow, I never really thought about Whip It like that. But when you play it like all moody, it's oh, this is deep and important, It's like
Totally. Sometimes music is more alike than different, and
mm,
uh, yeah.
it's true.
So
Um we also get as that kind of it goes kind of one into the other, and then it again it goes not that it becomes a jumble, but I feel like it's a little less uh reactionary. Like the music becomes more of a passenger sometimes, where at
mhm.
first sometimes it's like, oh, letting you know where we're at, what's going on, and then it just kind of becomes like reactionary and not it's not driving the scene as much once we're settled in. um but then we do get a funny it is very much like an audience or a passenger, because we get um when there's that slap, and I just wrote down the slap, and I'm trying to remember like who's slapping whom these days. um in the execution part, is it Hux slapping Finn, or is it one of the
Why does that sound right? I feel like all I can think of is Hux's face there.
yeah. um but the music reacts to that and almost gives like an ooh, like the music is like, oh, like you got slapped, like it has a kind of like draws back a little bit as a kind of reaction, which I liked.
I
um
noticed that too. Um, I think what you said about the music taking a back seat after that like march that I played on the violin is like it definitely does dissipate there. Um, you know, to make space for the dialogue and for us to focus on other things. But when the music is really front and center, like in the out in the open, that's usually I feel like those are usually some of the coolest like cinematic moments.
Mm,
Um, like visually too. I feel like that's because that's like I don't know how to say this because the whole thing is technically the film. It's sort of like a statement of it's like a solo that the filmmaker is taking it or it
right.
feels like sometimes. Like um yeah, I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, just my I say this like every episode, but like my favorite thing is when Luke is just his music is just playing for like 3 minutes straight on the island, and we
Hmm.
just get like a Luke showcase. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so
Uh,
to get that ominous shot of like all the stormtroopers marching together with the music, and it's just
mm.
like their own little like solo moment for that. Um, yeah, I love those
I
moments.
Was that the training montage kind of with
Yeah,
Luke? Like, yeah, yeah, totally. kind of evocative of like that 80s movie, like getting pumped up, like, except it's the opposite. It's like, here's my not pumped up, here's my day to day.
Yeah, and I think that is sort of like I don't know, a Luke love letter almost.
Hmm.
That part of the movie. It's
Yeah.
like if I were ever to be in a movie, like, or if someone were playing me in a movie at some point, I think like I think I would most want to see the part where like I'm just doing my thing and there's some like epic music. Just no talking, just like I want to see the montage
Like
of
moving the laundry from the machine to the dryer, and it's
yeah.
just like, ba-ba-bam.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and it get the I'm trying to think of other, my mind immediately goes to like 80s movies and that kind of training thing, but I feel like, did we get anybody else with their own just kind of um like just them
Epic.
being them kind of
Yeah, with when Rey is doing
with
her
Ray,
lightsaber training. That's like a
right?
big moment where we get like
And
her
even
with epic music.
when we first meet her, we get that like little,
Yep.
like, there's not, there's no dialogue, it's just her doing her thing
Yep.
with that when we first hear her theme behind it too. So that's all right.
I think
All
that's
right.
like I think when a character is introduced that way, that instantly makes me feel like, okay, this is an important, this is going to be an important character.
Right.
It's like, yeah, Rey's introduction, like who can forget her sliding down, the sand on
Totally.
Jakku with that really specific music. Yeah,
Yeah, it's one of my favorite Star Wars bits.
me too.
It's ended. It's gotten up there. Um,
So here we are. Okay, yeah. So now we're figuring out that, or not we, but like Rose and Finn find out that DJ has sold them out.
right. Well, we find out too, but he hasn't sold us out.
True.
I mean, in a sense.
How did you feel when that happened the first time you saw it?
Um, it may, well, I don't know. It's, you could, what the kind of tradition, what you're supposed to be expecting, and then by this point, your expectations are being undermined or subverted. So it's like, oh, I get it. You know, he's playing a kind of a cliche or a trope character, and then it's like, oh, but then at the end, he doesn't have the heart of gold, or he did enough, a little bit, but it didn't really go through that. And so I remember being, um, I don't know, a little bit. I don't know. My feelings on DJ are mixed and complicated,
Complicated.
because
Yeah,
I like so much of what he does, and then I really dislike so much of the way that he does parts of it, and then it's not, like I don't.
I agree with you. I like DJ in theory a lot more than e- every single moment.
Yeah.
Theoretically, I like him. Yeah.
Right. And then, when we've heard on our show from people who, as I was kind of complaining about the way that he kind of executes his mannerisms of having a stutter, and it's, people who have a stutter, who deal with that, kind of spoke up and be like, well, it's awesome to see somebody who's not, um, bumbling and, not played for laughs. It's, DJ's a
Like a
serious
cunning,
character with his own, kind of, his own arc and his own, he's it's not just like a comedy thing played for laughs, and I get that, but also I feel like his portrayal of it always seems a little bit off. Like he's almost doing it just to be, maybe if not for laughs, he's playing it up in a way to be just kind of weird as opposed to genuine, and
hmm.
so my feelings on him are mixed, overall, but I do like the way that this resolves for him. So I guess long-winded answer is I liked
Here you
that
like him.
turn. Yeah. Well, especially this came up. We're getting away from the music, but how did you feel about Lando? Always, have you always liked
I've never
Lando?
liked Lando.
Oh, okay, good. All right. Because I felt like I had a long time of disliking Lando before kind of coming around and being like,
Oh,
all right, I
really?
really like Lando.
Okay.
Because
I
I
feel
watched,
like when I say that, I'm like, I don't know, violating something that
no, no,
most
no.
people like.
Now I like him, but for a long time, mainly because I just only watched Star Wars and Empire and the first half of the holiday special for most of my life. We don't get that. Oh, everything's okay with Lando. Still, we get that. Just kind of like, oh, he just sold everybody out, and then is trying to kind of cover himself. It never seemed to me like Lando had any intention of, uh, you know, being a good guy. He was just out for himself and by extension, the people under his uh, purview at Cloud City. But he was just mainly looking out for number one and number one's associates. And then once things turned enough, then it became kind of, if not convenient for him to turn, it became like the thing for him to do. But I never felt like that. Not nobility, but I don't know that there was enough there for me to like him as much as a lot of people did. And a lot of people grew up with watching it kind of back to back with Jedi, where it's like, oh, but he's fun and heroic in Jedi, and like, oh, that's the character that we had all along. He was just in a bad spot in Empire. But I was like, no, I feel like that's the opposite. But
I think for me, it's like I didn't overtly dislike him as a kid, and I I guess I liked him enough in that he's a classic character, and so when I like him, it's or so I actually feel this way about like Han sometimes too, where I I like the classic characters that I grew up with, but sometimes I'm like, why do I really like them? Um, and Lando is definitely one where I just didn't really have too many deep thoughts about him. Like I just didn't. He was there, and it's like, oh, cool, because it's Lando and because he's in Star Wars. But
right,
there was nothing for me to be like, I love this character. Like I really care about this character. I feel this way in general about bounty hunters, though. About
mm,
like, and I feel this way about like Boba Fett. Even I mean, less
right.
so now that there's so much
Well,
extra material. But like
yeah,
until there was all this extra material, I was not like a huge Boba Fett fan. I mean, cool. He was cool, like in the way that I don't know, all your friends think he's cool, and so you kind of are like, okay, he's cool.
yeah,
But
cool in quotes.
yes, yes, yes. But I agree. I like
But yeah,
DJ better. I'm more interested in DJ as a character than I am Lando.
mm, no,
Although I have to watch Solo more. I've only seen it a few
yeah,
times.
that's what I was going to say. I think Boba Fett and Lando are both benefiting from kind of a um, character resurgence. That people are like, these guys are cool in quotes. Like, let's add more of that. Let's flesh out why we're cool and why we like them. And so,
Yeah, I think the
we
way that
get
you phrase that is how I feel about it too, is the characters are benefiting from all this extra stuff because it's not like, at least for me, it's not like these characters are so awesome that they're getting spin-offs. For me, it's like because of these spin-offs, I will now like these characters more. And so that kind of calls into question for me like the logic behind giving certain characters and certain arcs and certain types of stories center stage because on one hand there's people that are like, oh, we there's a demand for this. And then sometimes that's not actually what it is. Sometimes it's like if you make the content, there will be more love for the character. So you can't just like
right,
you have to kind of balance those sides and also take risks
right.
on which characters you're going to develop more.
Yeah,
Because
it's like a
no
Marvel.
one's going to
You're
really
not
love
really
them.
you're not
What was
really
that?
into Marvel, but the Marvel had that with things like Guardians of the Galaxy or like the Eternals, which was coming up. It's like that's nobody's favorite comic book, but like nobody's demanding that we do a Guardians of the Galaxy or an Eternals movie. But they were like, oh well, we feel like we could tell a cool story with this, and it would make a good movie. And we have these characters. Then now
Oh, I
even
didn't know
going back
that.
to the when the Avengers. When the movies first started, the first one out was Iron Man, and Iron Man was always like, a at best a B level hero. He was never. It was nobody. Very few people. I don't want to say nobody, but very few people had Iron Man as their favorite hero. And now, you can go into like Walmart and buy an Iron Man, thermos, and it's like, oh, cool. Like it's such weird. Again, same thing, kind of character reclamation.
I didn't know that, but yeah, I guess they know like if they make
Yeah,
something, people will care, and that's why you invest in the things that you want people to care about. But
right.
anyway, yeah. Um, going back to DJ, he I he sells them out. They're upset at as they would be. Phasma is
Sure.
there. Um, which is fine. I don't really have strong feelings either way about Phasma either, but I know some people
Hmm.
do. Last week's guest
Mm-hmm.
loves Phasma. What about
Mm-hmm.
you?
Um, yeah, I think I said this on the show that I feel like I liked bringing Phasma back, and I liked Phasma as this kind of like almost like a monster character, where it was just like, oh, like that's cool that she's going to be this kind of recurring. But then when they didn't bring her back for Rise of Skywalker, it's like, I feel like could have used one more Phasma.
Yeah. I think if they brought her back, I would have liked her more.
Right.
But speaking of characters that are not brought back, then we go to Snoke's boudoir,
Mm-hmm.
and we get Snoke's theme is like just very low, rumbly stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and what do you? I'll ask you first. What do you think of this whole section?
I wrote
And what did
that
you notice?
we get it kind of toys with the Emperor's music, but it never really goes there. It's always like a little bit of like kind of teasing of like almost like like the idea of the Palpatine kind of theme, but it doesn't really ever fully culminate. It's just kind of giving you an idea of like, oh, this is you've seen this kind of scene before, and thematically it's interesting now knowing what we know that that's more appropriate potentially. Um, but interesting that at the time it was more just kind of like, as far as I could tell, it was more just kind of like, oh yeah, you've seen this similar scene before, so we're going to use music that's evocative of that too, so you get the idea of like, oh, this is just like the end of Return of the Jedi except different. But then once we bring into the events of later movies like Rise of Skywalker, then it's like, oh well, this is more appropriate that he's got these kind of like kind of stalled bits and pieces of Palpatine's theme mixed in here.
What if I told you that like a few minutes ago when he's like, give me everything and raises Rey
Mm-hmm.
and she screams that we get a full on blasted Emperor's theme.
Cool. Oh, all right.
So we did get that
Hmm.
really overtly, like
Okay.
so overtly that on last week, the guest and like we were kind of going back and forth on like whether John Williams knew the whole time and like whether like,
Mm.
and I think that it was an accident that happened, that was put in there. Um, but one could ostensibly think like it was like so not subtle at all. Like goes from
Mm.
Snoke's theme to all of a sudden like Ray is, being tortured and it's like do do do
Mm.
do do do. Um it's so overt that it's like I'm surprised that more people didn't like talk about it, but I guess not everyone like focuses on the
Went
music.
back. Yeah. Well, do you think then that that's kind of a not a nitpicky thing, but do you think that that music is essentially coming from Snoke or coming from Rey? Like, do you think it's
Oh,
um,
interesting.
you know what I mean? Is it because it's we know that Snoke seems to be some kind of byproduct of Palpatine's quest to return, but then we also learn about Rey um, being genetically linked. So is the
That's
music
interesting.
her theme or his theme there?
Huh. Well, another thing that was brought up last week was oh, this is where where Justin Justin Scheid was on my show last week and he like screamed at me when I did this, but so I'll do it to you. So Emperor Palpatine's theme, we get there. And Rey's theme. like the same first three notes.
Hmm. Hmm. Totally. So is it all there? No, maybe. Who knows?
I think it's I think the like meta explanation is, you know, just a lot more boring uh,
Yeah.
than not. But I think if we were to take it as sort of like a happy accident, I think it maybe could be, it could be both of, it could be like their theme, both of their themes. Well, another thing that accompanied that part with the
Hmm.
theme is sort of like some high violin stuff that to me sounded like Ray being choked,
Hmm.
and sort of like a really tense pulling apart. And I felt like that maybe represented Ray a little bit more. But in this whole section, like Snoke is trying to, you know, get inside of her mind and expose, you know, her insides. So I feel like both could work. Although it's interesting because I feel like Snoke's revelations are always like really half-assed. Like they're not correct 100%. They're like sort of. They're like he sees like a, I don't know, um, a replication. Like I don't know, he sees not the full thing.
Right. But then, essentially reports on it like it's truth. Everybody's like, oh, yeah. And enough of a grain of it is true that it, I don't know. Well, that's why, again, that's um, everything that we've learned could be, should be taken with a grain of salt and might not be, because of, think of all the unreliable sources, even the reliable sources that we have, the people that we trust or that we kind of trust, like Obi-Wan obviously was misleading people about their heritage just to be like, well, yeah, and so I think, everything that has caused such a kerfuffle with kind of, who people are and who they're related to and all that, like, just because the bad guy said so doesn't make it necessarily fully the case. There are other things going on, that, so.
Totally. And I think also, um, like, if it turned out that Ray was not a Palpatine, and yet we're getting all this like Emperor reminiscent stuff right now, and even on the nose stuff just a little bit prior, I would make the argument that it still 100% fits. And um, because, like, I think about how the Force theme and how the Rebel fanfare sort of morphed from being associated with a specific character, like Luke or like with Obi-Wan or something, and sort of
Yeah.
morph into becoming more general, more, you know, applicable to more general circumstances, heroism, force, like overcoming great struggles, summoning up like powers and things like that. So even things that we initially hear in tighter association do, like their legacy sort of spreads on, sort of like how when talking about Luke's legacy and, you know, whether or not he's actually like the one doing everything, like his legacy has spread throughout the galaxy and is spreading and will continue to spread through his, you know, his myth, the legend, the stories, like people will take inspiration. And I think the flip side is true with the Emperor too. So even if Snoke is not the Emperor or operating under the Emperor, like no one is sitting in that chair with force powers, training a dark apprentice, like doing all this stuff and not also kind of channeling the Emperor. The Emperor's legacy, even if he were completely dead right now, the Emperor's legacy is going to be, it's going to be there regardless.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're the, well, not archetypes, but they are the kind of, the distillation of what their ideas, what they represent, kind of, so
Yeah.
that, yeah, their legacy is there. So they'll be, even if they're not directly related to the Emperor, they're being, Palpatine
Yeah, because I
enough
mean,
that
think of
they
how
get
many
that.
other Jedi we get the Force theme for. It's not
Right.
just,
Yeah.
you know, the two that we used to. So yeah,
Yeah.
it all yeah.
But speaking of which, then that where we go next from this is when the Snoke gets cut in half and the lightsaber flies through and Rey grabs it, and we get a little bit of the bold version of the Force theme.
Oh, yes, and I love it. Well, actually, before that, we do get one
Oh,
other thing,
okay.
and it's when Snoke is sort of like digging into Kylo and sort of trying to get him to kill Rey, and he's
Mm-hmm.
like, "You think you can turn him, pathetic child? I cannot be betrayed. I see his mind, his every intent. Blah blah blah." We get a little Snoke's boudoir
Hmm.
theme.
Is that the?
Like
Please tell me that's what it's officially called.
that's what it's called according to this one musicologist's
Oh,
thematic
cool.
catalog. So
All
yeah,
right.
if you're following along, I think it's incidental motif number 101, Snoke's boudoir.
Hmm.
Pathetic child.
Hmm.
It's just some very low stuff there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I never would have picked that out.
Oh, it took me a long time to pick that out too, because it's sort of like there's so much music going on. I definitely, and certainly not the first time. I mean, I would have noticed it, but I wouldn't have known unless I watched multiple times that it was a trend. And so, it's what do you pay attention to unless you realize it's a pattern?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah. So we get that. And then toward the end of that, the music goes into this like lower string chromatic swell thing that we've gotten a few times, like when stuff is turning dark, and also in Snoke's boudoir, we've gotten this a few times. It's sort of like a
Mhm.
just sort of like a low, low
Yeah,
creepy stuff.
that's funny. That sounds almost like Star Trek music, like original series, just kind of like 60s Star Trek danger music a little bit.
It definitely sounds like danger music, and it's
Mhm.
definitely
Yeah.
in many like those that sort of thing is, it's not unheard of
Right.
in this type of atmosphere. And then, yes, we do get, well, first, like a couple sound things that were just so pleasing to me
Mm.
is, first of all, the sound whenever Snoke is like dragging Rey around is just such a specific, like,
Yeah.
my favorite in this scene was like when he spins her around. You can like hear her dragging, um, like the way that they designed those force moves. And
Mhm.
again, we were talking about this last week as well, sort of like I feel like if you were to close your eyes and just listen to the force moves, like you would know just based on the sound, like what direction he's
Mm.
pulling her to an extent, like or whether
Mm.
it's like pulling up or like
Right.
pulling down or dragging. Those things all sound a little bit different.
Yeah,
And
like a lighter versus a heavier kind of sound.
yeah, and like pulling up sort of goes up like whoo, and
Right.
going down sort of is like whoo, and going toward feels like also like uh, I don't know, it's almost like Dopplery, like uh,
Right.
toward
Getting.
and away. Like away is like whoo, and toward is more like whoo. I don't know.
No, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah, all different sounds. And then my favorite lightsaber sound is Kylo's dirty lightsaber.
Oh yeah. It is. Yeah, that little sizzle that it's got there is totally a nice touch.
Oh, it is like it's so raw and like, I mean, it just sounds so dirty. It's like,
Mhm.
it's a dirty lightsaber. And I feel like I was trying to, I need to find this if it exists, but I hope someone's done like a lightsaber sound like test or like a little pageant of lightsaber sounds that you
Mhm.
can like close your eyes and guess whose lightsaber it is. I don't know. I bet Kylo's would really stand out.
Yeah.
So I looked it up to see if it indeed had like a different process. And Dave Acord, who I think was one of the sound editors on the film, said, confirmed that it was an obvious new sound effect. Let's see. He says, "We are attempting, along with his force power effect, to create sound effects that would mimic his persona, which is this raw power he has that's not quite formed. He's not well trained, but he's extremely powerful. It's a little wild and dangerous. The sword itself, the look of the sword, has the extra darts coming out of the side, and it's really sparkly and wavery. Looks a little homemade. The idea of the sound was to match that. Something that sounds like raw energy, just pure power, very brutal and kind of wild and dangerous sounding. So one of the ways that they did that was the, let's see, the Kylo Ren Force Rumble, I guess his cat's purring is like part of that. Is like part of Kylo's sound. And I don't know if it's part of his actual lightsaber sound, but he says it's part of Kylo's Force Rumble. Do you know what that?
Oh, yeah. Like when he's using the Force and you feel that. Especially if you have a subwoofer attached, it's easy to feel. If you're at home watching with a like a 5.1 or something like that, and you have a subwoofer going, it's easy to point out the Force. But like, oh yeah, that's the Force Rumble. But otherwise, it might need to be a theater thing.
So he has a dirty, wild, wavery, sparkly, raw lightsaber and a cat per Force Rumble. Yeah, Kylo Ren gets great sounds.
Totally.
It's really, I love hearing a lightsaber that's not just like sort of clean. It sounds like it's on fire. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, part of that, I just learned this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about his flashbacks in this. I think part of that is because he basically adapted his old lightsaber, like his blue kind of training lightsaber, to be this kind of his dark side lightsaber, and then doing that you can't really do that, so that's why it has the vents on the side, because it's like, well, it needs to. The energy wasn't quite, you couldn't focus it all straight, so it's all over the place, and so you got to have the vents coming out the side, and that's also gives it a little kind of sizzle around the edges and all that. So
that is so relatable to anything homemade I've ever tried.
right, it's almost good enough. You just got to have these vents, and it's
yeah. Oh, that's funny. I'm surprised we haven't seen it like totally malfunction more.
Right now. Well, I'm sure maybe there was a trial and error period in the beginning.
Yeah, wonder who he trialed on. So then what you were alluding to is after he cuts Snoke in half down the middle, which I didn't like appreciate the scene fully until I had seen the movie a few times. I just don't think I was paying attention to all the stuff that, I mean, I think I was like fooled a lot. Like, yeah, I was fooled by Kylo's like demeanor and not looking at the ways that he was setting up that kill. So then we get the Force theme. Yes.
Yeah. And like I went back to, I was like, wait, this is the Force theme, right? Because I get these things confused a lot. So I was like, Google Force theme and play it, and I was like, oh, but when it plays it in its original incarnation, it's that more kind of slower, meditative, almost one. It's like the mystical, like, energy of the Force. I'm like, oh right, duh. Like this has been in all of that stuff. But then when it gets like, whenever it's the kind of the Force or the hero, using the Force kind of in a heroic moment, then we get this kind of this more heroic sounding version, this brassier kind of like like the using it for a moment like that of like, okay, like hero doing something good becomes this kind of strong version of this song, of this theme.
I think, yeah, that's a good observation. And I think it's easy to forget how long the Force theme actually is. Like, it's actually a pretty long theme. And normally we only hear, normally we hear the very first bit, like, but it actually goes on. And so different times that we hear the Force theme throughout these movies, like I feel like, first of all, it's rare to hear as often as the Force theme pops up, which is all the time. It's the most used motif. We don't usually hear the whole thing. We normally hear like either the beginning bit or just the end bit. Like even as I like sing the end, I realize how rare we kind of like complete it out, and it's really in deeply impactful moments that it is allowed to really settle. But normally we hear do 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 do, if anything, or maybe even just the beginning. Do 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 do. The part that I think like one of the parts that we rarely hear is the part that we actually hear here, which is the really declarative like third part with the do 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 do, that part.
Right. That's the like build that like
Yeah, where it
declarative
builds
is a
like
good
to
word
the
for it.
top.
Yeah, it's a kind of stronger version of it, which again with those kind of stronger, clearer instruments being very kind of like here it is moment like.
And it stays more solid in where it is harmonically. So like here it's happening in, I think, B. Nice. I sang that in the right key.
All right.
Normally we would get something that has like a chord change. And obviously that would be less appropriate here. So we don't get that. We get just like the consistent we just skip straight to there. So none of this. Or what is it? There's like a Neapolitan in there. Whatever. It happens like usually we get a major chord there, either way.
Right.
And so I appreciate that they just keep it there, and it really pays off. Like, the 5 minutes cuts off like when it's about to really gear up into the fight, but it's such a good setup. Yeah, I love it.
Totally. Yeah, no, I love it too. It makes me happy. It's a good kind of like, there's some bits and pieces of Star Wars music that when used right give me a little bit of tingle or chills, and like that's one of them. When you throw a moment like that with a piece, there's a lot of them that are weird and they matter only to me to a certain extent. My kids are my kids are sick of hearing me drive around because sometimes they like to listen to Star Wars. So I've become a little more familiar with the Star Wars soundtracks, because it'll be like, oh, what do you want to hear? Oh, Star Wars. Like, all right, and we'll put one on. But especially with Star Wars, with the motion picture A New Hope, they are sick of me just kind of driving around, putting it on, and just like filling in random bits of dialogue, because it's like, to me, that's part of the music. Like, oh, this goes here. Like, that's that dialogue is part of the music, is part of the thing here. And so I'm just shouting bits that I'm like, I get like, oh, I'm totally invested in this, or like Return of the Jedi, which is my son's favorite, and I'm going to ask you about a bit from Return of the Jedi in a minute. But anytime we're at the end of the Jabba's palace music, and it's that kind of heroic, we get a little it's mixed. Wait, it's not the Force theme. It's the kind of version of the main theme, because it's reminiscent. It's when Luke and Leia are swinging from who knows where, but starting in Jabba's palace, starting in Jabba's sail barge and going to the skiff. And so it's reminiscent of that. The first time they did that in Star Wars, but here they're doing it again in Return of the Jedi. So we get a little bit of that, but it's in between these bits of music that I think are mostly just, I think it's original for Return of the Jedi, but that like like I'm terrible at humming these and actuating them, so you're gonna have to, but I'm always just like, like let's go, and don't forget the droids, we're on our way. Like, I'm doing the dialogue with it, and I'm totally, because I'm feeling it. I'm like, yeah, we just blew up the sail barge, and so now that's part of their they're sometimes a little bit resistant. They want me to shut up, but then also there are other points they're like in it because now they're feeling what I'm feeling essentially vicariously, and they know that okay, this music gets, let's go and don't forget the droids.
Interesting. Okay. I'm wondering how you, like, what bits of dialogue come easy to you when you listen to the
Well,
music?
um, it's often when it is, it feels like it's one blended thing. You know what I mean? It's not. Um, I'm trying to think of them off the top of my head now, but well, besides, let's go and don't forget the droids. But um, it's tough because I feel like I might know the dialogue better than the music for the most part, but then when there's that synergy where it's like, oh, this is just what the movie sounds like here, and of course it's mainly with the original trilogy because that's the ones where I'd put on. I've talked to other people about this. There's times growing up, you just put them on as like background while you're doing like I one time I have a specific memory of like, okay, I put Return of the Jedi this back in the VHS tape in a player, one of those things that was just played tapes. It didn't record anything, and there was a little TV attached to it. Throw the tape in, it would start playing automatically. I went to go clean my room, and then 2 hours later, I'm like, oh, I haven't looked at the TV once, but I knew exactly what was going on at all times because I'm hearing Return of the Jedi, and I know it so well, that it's just like, okay, this is just. I felt like I was watching it, but I'm actually cleaning my room and picking stuff up, and so that same
So it's
kind
just
of like,
wired. It's like just wired in
yeah,
together somehow.
yeah, it's just the kind of ambient environment, and that I feel like the original trilogy and to a certain extent the Phantom Menace, I'll get that a little bit in my head with like, oh, I can just
Interesting.
talk through this part because I know that it's there.
Huh. Okay, that's interesting.
Um,
What's your
but more
question?
so, yeah, well, more so from the first one. It'd be interesting. I'll make notes maybe and get back to you of like what parts I'm definitely, what lines are always me shouting out exactly what's going on because that's what the music dictates that I do. Like it just kind of unlocks something. It's not even intentional. It's just like, that triggers my brain to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like a parrot. Like I've given a cue that I'm like, oh, when this happens, I say this, and then it's not.
It sounds like that
But
would work best for like really specific cues.
yeah, you would think, but then there's other parts where it's just kind of like, why do I know? Like neither the music nor the scene are very memorable, but here I am parroting all of it back because I know that these two go together.
Hmm.
I know. We'll have to do an experiment with it. I'll jot it down next time it happens.
Yeah, I'm very curious.
Um, but so speaking of which, we've been listening to a lot of Return of the Jedi, and there's a part in that where I can't place. It might not be in the movie. It might just be on the soundtrack and isn't really fully represented on screen. Um, but I last time I watched Jedi, I couldn't pick out where this music happens, but the beginning of it is there.
It's on the
Uh,
soundtrack.
it's on the soundtrack.
Okay.
It's the in between uh, Lapti Nek and the Return of the Jedi. There's this Han Solo Return is at the court of Jabba the Hutt. Is the name of the track, and it has good. It's like bits and pieces of stuff that I know that it's when uh, she's freeing Han from the carbonite, and you get that moment of that little Han and Leia music sting when like, who are you, someone who loves you. You get that's totally
Mm-hmm.
that's all mixed in there.
Okay.
But then I feel like, and I think I tweeted about this, and I may have it's been not bothering me, but it's been interesting me for a while that like there's a good like 2 or 3 minutes of music that seems to go with the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then to me, here's what it seems like to me, and I know it's not the case, but to me it seems like they were like, okay, we got that done, and everybody left the room except for the like the guy playing the chimes and like one guy playing some kind of horn that I can't exactly place it. It might be a trombone, might be a French horn. I don't even know what. I'm bad at picking these things out, but like everybody left except like these two, and they were like, now's our chance. and the guy playing the horn just like goes off on a weird solo for a good minute or so, and then like the chimes guy waits until he like hits the last note, and then it's like ring, and it's like this like what, like how did it totally seems like the adults left the room and these guys just like were left to like mess around, knowing that it wasn't going to make it onto the soundtrack, but like, well, just throw it on there to fill it out.
That's hilarious.
But I'll send you the link to the specific track at some point, because it's totally like, oh yeah, normal Star Wars music for a good like 2 or 3 minutes, and then it's just like, what am I
Um,
listening to?
that's really funny. Do you remember the track name?
It's called Han Solo Returns at the Court of Jabba the Hutt.
Okay. Um, that's funny. I've never the only Star Wars soundtrack that I've owned is Phantom Menace.
Hmm.
Like I didn't grow up listening to the I, I didn't grow up listening to the soundtracks to the extent that a lot of other people I know did. I know them from the movies,
Right.
and like as an adult, you know, there's so many different editions of the soundtracks. Um, I listen to them now, and it's not really an experience that I had growing up of like putting on a specific CD or a record and getting to know that one thing. Like it's just I know them from watching the movies so many times. So
Totally.
actually, a lot of the times I have less knowledge than other people on is on the soundtrack. I mean, that's starting to change now because of this podcast. I'm like, let me let me listen to these, and now I'm more interested in sort of the discrepancies. But there are many discrepancies, so it doesn't that doesn't surprise me because the cues are often, I mean, John Williams uh, will often record a separate version for the soundtrack
Right.
that doesn't have to fit so clearly with the picture.
Hmm.
So, like when he's conducting the orchestra, like he doesn't use a click track, which keeps you on time and everything. He does it more organically, but still, sometimes you're confined to like what is happening on screen, and maybe the way that he's feeling the music, he would rather take a little more time there or insert a thing, or maybe he did insert it, but it got cut in the movie. And
Hmm.
so that's the origin of a lot of discrepancies. There are many discrepancies, and oftentimes there's extra music in the film that's not on the soundtrack.
Yeah, I've noticed that with
Definitely with the
the
sequels.
the one that I just was talking about, the end of it's the actual track called Return of the Jedi, the one with where the Sarlacc battle at Sarlacc's pit, if the board game is to be believed. Um, the the bit at the end doesn't quite match up because we had been listening to the soundtrack so many times, and like I said, I'm shouting like, let's go and don't forget the droids. I'm like, there's a lot of other, they kind of loop around and add some other bits back in a little bit to make it match up with how the editing ended up making the movie. You can tell that it's like, oh, okay, they went back and just reused this other part, but the one that's on the soundtrack is just more straightforward. And so it's always like there's a big um like an awful lot happens between two different points. I'm like, oh, they just went back and reused some music in between here and here, so I can't fit in all the dialogue. It's not a direct match, but
Very
um
interesting. Well, the whole like I will do a Return of the Jedi season at some point. I don't know. I'll
hmm,
have to catch up at some point. But
we could talk about the like
all of the
half dozen
Jabba's.
different versions of Lapti Nek.
Oh, see, that's another thing.
Mm.
Didn't know didn't know that until I was an adult. Um, I the whole Jabba like the whole sail barge thing is like a very unique piece of music. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
It's not like a motif that just comes up a lot. It's like bespoke for that scene, and it
Mm.
is a very and it's sort of like what in film music is called like a set piece. I don't know. You went to film school. Maybe this is also something used in other areas of filmmaking too. But it's sort of like a set piece music. Like the music is a set piece theme or something, and it is very specific to where it appears and not just like recycled a lot. It's like very tailored, very complete. The Fathiers is another example.
Hmm.
The music is very specific, and it's not like a motif we hear a lot. is just like a track just for the Fathier escape.
Right.
The asteroid field is probably the most famous example
Right.
of a set piece theme. And like, think of how memorable that is for people, and very specifically to that instance. You're not like thinking, oh, maybe it's from, you know, uh, Star Wars, maybe it's from Return of the Jedi. Like, based on that music, the one and only time, the main instance of it is when it happens in the asteroid field. So
Totally.
yeah,
That's
Jabba's is
that's
a little
another
like
one.
that.
When anytime that comes on, I'm shouting like C-3PO the whole time. That's because I'm filling in those bits. I'm just like, oh, and my kid's like, what's wrong? I'm like, no, that's what's going on in the music right now.
Oh, love those set pieces. I love those set pieces. They're just
Yeah.
so specifically evocative to what they were created for. Um, yeah, well, I definitely look forward to doing the original trilogy
Mm.
seasons. We'll have to do that. So I don't know the answer to your question. I'm gonna have to. Um,
Listen to it. I'll send you the track just so you can be sure that you know what I'm talking about. But it's also, yeah. I want to know A, what kind of horn you think that is, and then B, what you think the deal is with this music, because it makes me laugh every time I hear it now. It's become like I look forward to it a lot, and that it totally, like, as it just kind of dwindles into just these two dudes playing, then it follows up, and the next one is the Return of the Jedi. So it starts with that, like, on the sail barge, like at the Sarlacc's pit, like big bump bump, like that's the next thing that happens on the soundtrack. So it's like I'm laughing and I'm enjoying this little bit of like noodling, and then all of a sudden it just like snaps you back in, and it's really dramatic.
I'm
It's
so
nice.
intrigued. It sounds really funny, so I'm very curious what you're talking about. Yeah, if I'll put a link to that in in the show notes, um, for people to listen. So, do you have anything else about the music and sound of the Last Jedi or these scenes?
I'm trying to think. I don't. Is there a? I'll give you another question. Is there a standout kind of motif or theme from this that I should be aware of as we go through the rest of it? Besides, I guess Luke's music is the main thing, right? Luke's new kind of Act Two music.
Do you mean from the film in general?
Yeah, from the film. I feel like I don't have a handle on a good. Um, a lot of them have a standout piece of music that is like, oh yeah, that's the one from that. Like, and even if it's reused later, it's like, well, yeah, that's the one from. But I feel like this one, I don't. When I put on the Force Awakens, I'm like, oh yeah, well, listen, like Ray's theme is the first one that kind of stands out to me. That it's like, oh yeah, that's the one from that one, almost like the hit single. So like, is there a hit single essentially from The Last Jedi?
Well, for me, my favorite um, track from the Last Jedi, my favorite motif or whatever or whatnot is Octo Island,
Mm,
and we've already gotten a lot of that. Um, I mean, I think it's number 2 on the soundtrack, but we also just hear it a lot more toward the beginning of the movie, and I think we'll hear it again. Sort of the Jedi Steps stuff, Octo Island. I would definitely go back and listen to that, and and Ray's theme. I mean, I know you already love Ray's theme, but Ray's theme has like 4 different parts to it. There's like 4 different Ray's themes,
right.
so um, I would look out for like the more lyrical parts. So there's the and that's not really what I'm talking about here. That's sort of like early Ray,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm talking sort of about the parts that are like do 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 do.
All right.
Um,
I think
yeah, we did. Yeah,
we
and
talked about this when you were on
with
this
her
season.
lightsaber,
Yeah, totally.
totally. And also, I would say the one theme that really comes back toward the end. We've already heard it a bunch, but it really comes in the during the Battle of Crate is Roses.
All right.
And I feel
Mm,
like that's one that doesn't have a lot of recall value for a lot of people just because it was only really used in this film.
mhm,
Um, but she actually does have like a full out theme, and it actually
mm.
is more fleshed out in like the end credit suites. And like, I think the way that it's fleshed out makes me feel like it was meant to be a bigger part of it. But yeah, we do. Yeah, so we'll get it during the Battle of Crate.
It's interesting because that hearing you do it just now, it's almost more evocative of other John Williams stuff. Like it makes me think of like a Spielberg kind of John Williams vibe, which
Yeah.
I wonder if that is.
No, you're thinking, I think, yeah, it's funny. Like, I think, did Alex like say no, no. Okay. He brought up Jurassic Park, I think.
Oh,
Yeah, the mode of Rose's theme is very reminiscent of other themes. So I'll
mhm.
like it's also reminiscent of other Star Wars themes.
Mhm. Hmm.
And
Oh yeah.
young Anakin.
Yeah.
So that is something I enjoy speculating about. That Rose gets sort of like an optimistic Force type theme. That young Anakin, that Yoda get. Just something to think about.
I like that. Well, like, then I thought about Rose and Yoda, which I don't know. They don't ever interact, but that's an interesting like. Oh yeah, all right. Which that made me think of Rhoda. Like if you mash them up together, and I don't know why.
Rodian
Oh, there you go. Rose, Rodian,
and
Yoda.
Rhoda the Hutt.
Is there a Rhoda the Hut?
Yeah.
Really? Oh man.
I think isn't that the name of the little hutlet? I think there's like a baby hut. The original Baby
Oh,
Yoda is the baby hut.
right, right.
I think it's Rhoda the Hutt, I think.
I like that.
Yeah, Ahsoka saves Rhoda the Hutt in the
Hmm.
Clone Wars film. And it's a very cute thing. They call him Stinky. Um, but yeah, Rosa's theme is definitely um, it's very optimistic.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So
That's going to
it'll
be the
come up
one. I'm going
later.
to go back and play it. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, one thing that surprised me about The Last Jedi is that I feel like it really ends with. I mean, I feel like it really ends with Luke more than a continuation. Like it definitely continues Rey's story, but I feel like it is more than anything a culmination of Luke's story. And so I remember I love this movie, but like I also remember in the theater being like interesting. Like Rey didn't even like get the last like thing. Like this was still Luke's movie, and
Right.
so to that end, like I'm a sucker for the Force theme and like the binary sunset thing. And so it is very impactful, I think, when we hear that at the end after, Luke's moment, when we see his like robes fall off him. Like, I don't know. That theme, I think the Force theme is just like
Mm.
such a great, it is used so many times. And yet I'm not like, it hasn't grown old on me. I like it. I still love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's true because it's always used at those moments. So that's it. They don't waste it. They use
Well,
it a lot, but they don't waste it. I think.
well, they don't waste the whole thing because they do kind of waste the beginning of it sometimes. And I think in the Rebels animated series, I think they use it way too
Oh,
much,
could be.
certain parts of it. But the full actualized theme, like they really, it's I can think of the really impactful moments it's used. It's like
Mm.
raising the X-wing, like
Yeah.
big things like that. And there's another huge moment in The Rise of Skywalker, which is my favorite musical moment in The Rise of Skywalker, and it's that theme when raising the thing. So yeah, it's a great theme. Ugh. And they use it. I think they use it well.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree.
Well, thank you for joining me today. It's I mean, I'm a big fan of your show. You brought me into the Star Wars podcast fold.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I love that this. I'm glad that you're doing this, and I'm excited to. I'm excited that you are thinking about going back and doing the classic trilogy too.
I must. I
Yeah.
must. Maybe in your off
Now,
season.
yeah. So, are you going to go do?
Release
It's
order.
an interesting. You're in an interesting
Yeah, I
position starting
know.
late. But are you going to go back and go to episode one and go
No.
episodically, or would you
No.
go
I think
release order?
release order for sure
All
because
right.
I mean not only just I'm definitely a release order person. None of that machete order thing.
No, no, come on.
I've tried it. It's not as good as Reddit says. But also just the thematic development. I think it's what makes sense. The prequels develop musically off of the original trilogy.
Right. Yeah, especially with the music that you're not reusing ideas, but incorporating ideas that you've already come up with, which is, I mean,
I think
story-wise,
music wise.
that's why.
I think,
Yeah,
I think the entire thing rests on that.
It only makes sense if you watch it in that order. So
agree. I think prequels are only earned once you already care about the original story. So I'm definitely not a chronological person.
Good.
Yeah. Well, what other shows do you have besides Star Wars Minute?
Right. The only other active one is actually on a little bit of a summer break, a planned summer break, which is ABCDTOS, which is we're going alphabetically through all of the Star Trek, the original series episodes. And it's with the same guys that I did ABC Devo with, which is where we went alphabetically through all of Devo's songs, which is reusing the format with which we did Alphabetical, which is, I think, where it started. Where Alex and I, who do Star Wars Minute, and then with two of our other friends, Adam and John, we went alphabetically through all the Beatles songs. And it's good. The two bands that I've done that with are good because they're both relatively finite. I think there might be more Devo songs on the horizon eventually, but for the most part, their catalog is has a beginning and an end. And the Beatles definitely, every once in a while they unearth new things, but there's a handful, just like there's I think over 200 movies by minutes shows these days. There's also a good handful of alphabetical bands catalog shows, which I'm also happy about, the kind of like helping launch that format. There's people who've done it for David Bowie and the Ramones and Weird Al and all these other, kind of going alphabetically through an artist catalog. I think is a good way to go, because then you get to jump around chronologically, and it's exactly the opposite of what we were just saying with release order, where it's like you get to see what the build from point A to point B. I think the idea is that with alphabetically, you're familiar enough with their catalog, so when you jump around, you can say like, oh, okay, well this, here's an example of where they were here, and the compare and contrast. It's almost like a curated shuffle.
That's
so
cool.
You get new ideas out of it. I don't know. That's what I'm telling myself. It's just a fun thing to do.
It was the right way. Don't worry. It was correct.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, for those listening, for the rare people listening who don't know of Star Wars Minute podcast, Star Wars Minute they go through the movies 1 minute at a time, but every weekday. So every week it's also 5 minutes. And this season we are doing the same 5 minutes at a time. So if you want to hear more about the same minutes, but maybe with less focus on the music, but definitely more focus on the cinematography and backstories of the actors and other fun pop culture references that I'm bad at making. So, and comedy, which I'm very bad at. Then you can
far less focus on the movie sometimes. And we're just kind of like, we end up on tangents and riffs, but it's loosely covering the same minutes.
Then definitely check out that show. It's on all the podcasting platforms and on YouTube, as is this. So if you're listening on YouTube, or if you're watching on YouTube, then this is also a podcast. And if you're watching the podcast, this is also on YouTube with captions. So yeah, check those out if you want. I hope this episode was interesting. As always, I want to hear your thoughts, and I want to hear if I said anything that would, if you have any answers that I didn't have or alternate opinions, because after the season is over, I would like to do like a fact check episode, and sort of like a episode to, I don't know, correct things. And, new revelations have been made. And now sometimes when I go back to the old ones, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that was a motif. And I didn't mention that because I didn't notice the pattern yet until later. So yes, so that there will be that at the end. So yeah, if I'm wrong about something, just let me know. Yeah, that's about it. You can send me an email at podcast@starwarsmusicminute.com if you have like a more in-depth question, or I'm on Twitter at Star Wars Museman and at Chrysanthi Tan. And there's a link in the show notes if you prefer to submit an anonymous question. Though I think people are getting braver at asking questions now. It used to be sort of people would be afraid to ask a bad question, but I don't think.
Oh, this is more about not
Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm afraid of saying something
right.
wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, type of thing.
Right. Not that they don't want people to know that they're into Star Wars music. They just don't want people to know that they don't know
If
the
you're
answer.
listening to this podcast, if you're listening to this in secret, then
Right.
I hope that you find people that you don't have to do this in secret around someday.
Be proud.
Yeah, that would be nice. Anyway, thank you as always, and I'll see you next week on Star Wars Music Minute.